The young millionaire agreed to take the biggest loser of the school to the dance. It was just a cruel bet to laugh at her in front of everyone. But when the girl walked in, no one believed what they saw. She entered transformed and made the millionaire regret his bet. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. Michael Collins adjusted his pure silk Italian tie in front of the mirror in his office on the top floor of one of the most luxurious buildings in Boston. Through the panoramic window, the Charles River wound lazily, reflecting the last golden rays of the evening sun. At 29, he had already achieved more than many would accomplish in a lifetime. His latest financial technology startup had been valued at more than $500 million, and his face was a constant presence on the covers of major American business magazines. The latest generation laptop on his tempered glass desk emitted a soft sound announcing the arrival of a new email. Michael would normally delegate the task of checking his electronic correspondence to one of his assistants, but something in the subject line caught his attention. St. Thomas Prep Reunion, 10 years since graduation. His fingers hesitated over the touchpad for a few seconds before opening the message. St. Thomas Prep, one of Boston's most traditional institutions, occupied an ambiguous place in his memories. It was there that he began to develop his network of contacts, his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage, to make himself noticed. But it was also there that he cultivated an arrogance that today was his trademark. The email was elegantly formatted, with the school's golden crest at the top. It was a charity gala event organized by the Alumni Association, which would take place in the historic school building itself. The party would include a masquerade ball, and all proceeds would go to social projects supported by the institution. Michael moved the cursor to the trash icon, ready to delete the invitation. Reunions didn't match his carefully constructed image. There was no time for nostalgia in his life of exclusive events and million-dollar negotiations. That's when his cell phone vibrated with a WhatsApp notification. It was a message in a newly created group, bringing together alumni from the class of 2015. The names appeared on the screen: Anthony, now a corporate lawyer; Sophia, who had become a successful digital influencer; Richard, his former rival from school days and current CEO of a competing technology company. The conversation flowed with reminiscences and good-humored teasing, until someone mentioned a name that made Michael freeze: Caroline Sanders. The invisible girl from school, as some called her, the one who wore braces, thick-lensed glasses, and clothes that looked like they had come from her grandmother's wardrobe. "Anyone have news about Caroline?" asked Sophia. "I heard she became a dentist," replied Anthony. "Not just any dentist," added Mary, who had always been closer to Caroline. "She's one of the most respected dental surgeons in Massachusetts. She works on social projects, has a clinic that serves underprivileged people." Michael felt something strange in his stomach as he read this information. He remembered the times he had participated in jokes about her, the laughter in the hallways when she passed by with her head down, carrying her stack of books. That's when Richard, his eternal rival, launched the provocation that would change everything. "Michael, you who were always the king of impossible conquests, I doubt you have the courage to invite Caroline Sanders to be your date at the ball. Or is the great businessman afraid of being seen with someone who isn't part of his social circle?" The challenge hit Michael exactly where Richard knew it would affect him: his pride. The other people in the group started reacting with emojis and provocative comments. Michael felt the blood boil in his veins. Without thinking twice, he typed his response: "Not only will I invite her, but I guarantee she will be my companion at the party. Want to bet?" Richard responded almost instantly: "It's a bet. If you succeed, I'll make a donation of $100,000 to the charity of her choice. If you lose, you make the donation." Michael smiled, confident. Money was never a problem for him, and his vanity wouldn't allow him to refuse a public challenge. After all, what woman would refuse an invitation from him? No matter how much she had changed, she would still be the same shy and insecure Caroline. As before, right? He minimized the message group and opened his browser, typing her name. The first images that appeared surprised him. Caroline Sanders had transformed into an elegant woman with delicate features and a serene gaze. She still wore glasses, now more modern, and a smile that conveyed a confidence he didn't recognize. He discovered that she divided her time between private clinics in Boston and Cambridge and dedicated a significant part of her schedule to social projects. Her name appeared in scientific articles and in reports about free dental care programs for underprivileged communities. Michael leaned back in his Italian leather chair, contemplating the sunset over the Charles River. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly challenged. It wouldn't just be another conquest for his collection. Something told him he was about to embark on a journey very different from anything he had ever experienced. Caroline Sanders organized her electronic calendar while having coffee on the balcony of her apartment in Beacon Hill, a historic Boston neighborhood. The day would begin in 2 hours with a series of appointments at her social clinic in Roxbury. The view of Beacon Hill's historic brownstones, illuminated by the soft morning light, always brought her a sense of peace. Her cell phone vibrated with a notification. It was a message from Mary, her friend from school days, the only one with whom she maintained regular contact. "Carol, you won't believe what's happening in the alumni group." Before she could respond, another notification appeared, an email from St. Thomas Prep about the charity event. Caroline was already aware of the party. As coordinator of one of the social projects supported by the school, her presence was more than expected. What surprised her was the message that came next, from an address she didn't immediately recognize. "Dear Caroline, I hope you remember me. Michael Collins, your classmate from St. Thomas. I'd like to have coffee with you to talk about the charity event. I have some ideas to contribute to your social projects." Caroline adjusted her glasses and reread the message several times. Of course she remembered Michael. Impossible to forget him. The rich and popular boy who never missed an opportunity to make jokes at her expense. The arrogant teenager who transformed insecurity into power. The man who now graced magazine covers with his studied smile and his success stories. Mary called at that moment. "Carol, you need to know. There's a bet going on in the group. Richard challenged Michael to take you as his date to the ball. $100,000 for charity." Caroline felt an ironic smile form on her lips. So that was it. The sudden attempt to reconnect was just another ego game. They said Michael Collins had never lost a bet in his life. Well, maybe it was time to learn. She responded to the email with her usual politeness. "Hello, Michael. We can meet today at 6 p.m. at the Green Kettle in Back Bay. I only have an hour available." The response came almost instantly. "Perfect. I'll be there." The day proceeded normally. Caroline performed complex procedures at her private clinic in the morning and dedicated the afternoon to the social project. Each transformed smile, each life touched, reaffirmed her certainty that she had chosen the right path. At 6 p.m. sharp, she entered the historic Boston Cafe. Michael was already there, occupying a discreet table at the back of the establishment. He wore an impeccable blue suit that probably cost more than all the equipment in her social clinic. His face showed poorly disguised surprise when he saw her. Caroline was no longer the awkward teenager from before. She wore an elegant casual dress, naturally wavy hair falling over her shoulders. The glasses were still there, now part of her particular charm. Her posture conveyed a serene confidence that had nothing to do with arrogance. "Caroline, you look different," Michael commented, standing up to pull out the chair for her. "We all do, Michael. It's what happens in 10 years, she responded with a polite smile. "So, what are your ideas for the social projects?" Michael hesitated for a moment. He had prepared a whole speech, planned every gesture, every word, but something in Caroline's direct gaze completely disarmed him. "Actually, Caroline, I wanted to invite you to be my date at the charity ball." She took a sip of water, maintaining eye contact. "And why would I accept?" "Because," Michael began, but for the first time in years he found himself at a loss for words. The rehearsed answer about networking and visibility for social projects now seemed ridiculously inadequate. "You know about the bet, don't you?" he finally admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. Caroline smiled, a smile that had nothing of timidity or insecurity. "I know everything, Michael. including about the community dental clinic that's about to close because a hospital management startup, your startup, by the way, automated the public funding distribution system. Michael paled. He had no idea that his corporate decisions had this kind of impact. For the first time, he found himself facing the real consequences of his actions, personified in Caroline's serene but firm gaze. "I accept being your date at the ball," she said, standing up. "But not for you nor for the bet. I accept because those children need the $100,000, regardless of who makes the donation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have patients waiting for me." Caroline left the cafe, leaving behind a completely disconcerted Michael Collins, feeling for the first time in many years like that insecure boy who used to hide behind arrogance. He didn't yet know it, but that was just the beginning of a profound transformation. Michael spent the night sleepless in his luxurious penthouse, Caroline's words echoing in his mind. For the first time in years, the success he so often flaunted was beginning to have a bitter taste. Sitting in his Italian designer armchair, with an untouched glass of whiskey on the side table, he opened his laptop and began researching the community clinic that Caroline had mentioned. The numbers were striking. More than 2,000 children treated per year, complex dental treatments performed for free, prevention programs that changed lives, and all of this was threatened by an algorithm that he himself had approved, a line of code that prioritized efficiency over humanity. His cell phone vibrated with a message from Beatrice, his current girlfriend, a Boston socialite who frequented the same exclusive parties as he did. "Mike, we need to decide which champagne to serve in our box at the next Monaco Grand Prix. Laurent Perrier is too common lately." The futility of the message hit him like a slap. He closed the conversation without responding and continued his research. He discovered that Caroline not only worked at the community clinic, but had developed an innovative method of care that combined cutting-edge technology with humanization. Her work had been recognized internationally, but she maintained a discreet profile focused on real results rather than spotlights. The next morning, contrary to his usual routine, Michael dismissed his driver and took an Uber to Roxbury. He wanted to see with his own eyes the clinic that his system was harming. Outside the simple but well-maintained building, a line of people waited for care. Children played in a small improvised playground, their smiles revealing orthodontic appliances that would cost a fortune in private clinics. Through the window, he saw Caroline in action. She was attending to an elderly lady with the same attention and delicacy she would dedicate to a private patient. Her white coat contrasted with the colorful and welcoming decor of the office, clearly designed to make children feel at ease. "You shouldn't be here," a familiar voice surprised him. It was Mary, Caroline's friend from school days, who he now discovered was the clinic's administrator. "But since you came, how about seeing what we're about to lose?" Mary led him through the interior of the clinic, showing every detail of the project. In the waiting room, murals displayed before and after photos of patients, children who had recovered not only their smiles, but their self-esteem. In a corner, a teenager with braces explained to a group of younger children the importance of oral hygiene, part of a peer education program. "You know, Michael, when your system was implemented, we lost 40% of our public funding," Mary explained. "Without hostility, but firmly. Caroline has been using her own money to maintain some more urgent treatments, but it's not sustainable. In 3 months, we'll have to start refusing new patients." In the hallway, they crossed paths with Caroline, who was coming out of a consultation. She observed them with an unreadable expression, but showed no surprise at Michael's presence. "Administrative meeting in 10 minutes, Mary," she said simply, before entering another room. "She was never one to hold grudges, you know," Mary commented, observing Michael's troubled expression. "Even in school days, when you and your friends teased her, she said that one day we would all mature. I think she was expecting more from you after all this time." Michael felt the weight of those words. He remembered every moment when he had used his popular position to diminish Caroline, always masking his own insecurity with false superiority. Now it was she who occupied a position of true respect, earned not through poses in magazines or numbers in a bank account, but through meaningful work and real impact on people's lives. Upon leaving the clinic, Michael was no longer the same man who had entered. The facade of success he had built was beginning to show its first cracks, revealing an emptiness that no award or business conquest had managed to fill. In his office later that day, he cancelled 3 meetings with investors and spent hours poring over the code of the funding distribution system. There was a way to fix this, he was sure. Not just because of the ball or the bet, but because for the first time in his adult life, Michael Collins was beginning to see beyond himself. His phone rang again. It was Beatrice, insisting on the champagne issue. "We'll talk later," he replied, tersely, hanging up immediately afterward. On his computer screen, a photo of the community clinic team smiled amid a group of children. In the center of the image, Caroline emanated a serenity he had never known in his social circles. It was the smile of someone who had found their true purpose. Caroline was finalizing a report in her private office when she received an email that made her furrow her brow. The sender was from the Boston Health Department, and the subject mentioned a revision in the funding distribution system for community clinics. Her heart raced as she read the content. A change in the algorithm had been implemented, and the funds for her clinic would not only be restored, but increased by 20%. Attached to the email was a technical document explaining the changes. Caroline didn't need to read much to recognize Michael's influence. The corporate language couldn't completely hide the fingerprints of someone who was trying to fix a mistake. "Interesting," she murmured to herself, allowing a small smile. It wasn't the grand gesture she would have expected from the Michael she knew in school, but something more subtle and perhaps for that very reason, more significant. That same afternoon, in one of Boston's most upscale areas, Michael was facing a delicate situation. Beatrice had appeared without warning in his office, impeccable in her designer dress, but with an expression that oscillated between indignation and disbelief. "What do you mean you're taking someone else to the ball? And that social project dentist of all people?" she questioned, her voice controlled but cutting. "Do you have any idea what this will cause in our circle?" Michael continued organizing some documents on his desk, surprisingly calm. "First, Beatrice, there is no more our circle. Second, yes, I'm taking Caroline to the ball, and no, it's not just because of a bet." "Oh, don't tell me the great Michael Collins is developing a social conscience." Beatrice laughed, but it was a laugh without humor. "Or is it something more? You've seen how different she looks now." "What I saw," Michael responded, finally facing her, "was someone who always knew who she was, while we spent years pretending to be something we're not." The discussion was interrupted by an important video call. Beatrice left the office, slamming the door, leaving behind a strangely relieved Michael. It was as if each tie broken with his old life left him feeling lighter. Meanwhile, in a cafe near Faneuil Hall, Caroline met with Mary to discuss the news about the clinic's funding. "It can't be a coincidence," Mary commented, stirring her coffee. "He visited the clinic 3 days ago, and now, as if by miracle, the system changes." Caroline adjusted her glasses, thoughtful. "Maybe he's changing, Mary. Or maybe he's just beginning to show who he always was beneath that facade of arrogance." "And the ball?" Mary asked, leaning forward with curiosity. "Are you really going with him?" "I am," Caroline responded simply. "Not for who he was, nor for who he's trying to be. I'm going because that place, that school, is part of my history, and maybe it's time to rewrite some chapters." The conversation was interrupted by Caroline's cell phone. It was a message from Michael. "Can we talk? No bets, no games, just talk." Mary peeked at the message and raised her eyebrows. Well, looks like someone is really trying." Caroline typed a simple response. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m., Boston Common. We can walk and talk." The rest of the afternoon proceeded normally, but there was something different in the air. At her private clinic, Caroline found herself looking out the window more times than usual, thinking not about the past or the future, but about the strange twists that life sometimes presents. In his office, Michael was going through a silent but profound transformation. He cancelled his participation in 3 gala events, discreetly donated a significant amount to other social projects in the city, and, for the first time in years, dined alone in a small neighborhood restaurant where no one recognized him or cared who he was. Night fell over Boston, covering the city with its mantle of golden lights. From their respective windows, Michael and Caroline observed the same sky, each lost in their own thoughts about change, redemption, and the possibility that sometimes people can surprise us in the most unexpected way. Boston Common displayed its most vibrant colors at the end of that spring afternoon. Michael arrived 15 minutes before the agreed time, something unprecedented for someone who used to make a point of being elegantly late to demonstrate his importance. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a white shirt, a conscious choice that reflected his attempt to leave social armor behind. He sat on a bench near the bandstand, watching the families that strolled by and the children playing, oblivious to the complexities of the adult world. A boy with braces was smiling openly as he chased a friend, without any sign of the insecurity that Michael recognized in his own old-school photos. Caroline arrived punctually at 7 p.m., carrying a small backpack that suggested she was coming straight from work. Her hair was tied in an unpretentious bun, and she still wore the same glasses that Michael was beginning to see, not as a symbol of inadequacy, but as an integral part of her personality. "Good evening, Michael," she greeted with a serene smile. "I thought you would choose a more exclusive place." "I think I've spent enough time in exclusive places," he replied, standing up. "Shall we walk?" They began to traverse the park's paths side by side, maintaining a respectful distance between them. The initial silence wasn't uncomfortable, but laden with unspoken words seeking their moment to emerge. "Thank you for what you did for the clinic," Caroline began, breaking the silence. "Although you didn't need to do that because of the ball." "It wasn't because of the ball," Michael responded quickly, perhaps too quickly. It was because it was the right thing to do. I had never stopped to think about the real impact of my corporate decisions." They stopped near the pond, where ducks swam lazily in the calm waters. Caroline took a small paper bag from her backpack. It contained pieces of stale bread. "Want to feed the ducks?" she offered naturally, as if they had been doing this for years. Michael took some pieces of bread, feeling the rough texture between his fingers. Such a simple gesture, so distant from his board meetings and business dinners. He threw a piece into the water and watched the ducks swim toward it. "You know, Caroline, I've spent the last few days thinking a lot. About school, about who I was, about who I've become, and about who you want to be." She completed the reflection, tossing another piece of bread to the ducks. "That too," he admitted. "When I entered your clinic the other day, I saw something I've never found in any of my achievements, real purpose. You've built something meaningful, something that really matters." Caroline observed him carefully, noting the small changes. In his posture, in the tone of his voice, in the absence of that arrogance that previously seemed to be part of his DNA. "You know you don't have to abandon everything you've built to make a difference, right?" she commented. "Sometimes it's just a matter of redirecting resources, of using your privilege to open doors for those who need it." Michael absorbed those words. It was true. His influence and resources could be powerful tools if used the right way. "I have so many ideas, Caroline. So many projects that could really help people, but I need your help to do this right." "My help?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes, you understand people's real needs, you know how to implement projects that work. I have the resources and contacts, but I need your perspective, your experience." A group of children ran past them, laughing and shouting. Caroline observed them with a smile before responding. "You know what has impressed me most in the last few days, Michael? It wasn't the change in the funding system, although that was important. It was seeing you begin to see beyond your own bubble without needing to abandon who you are." They walked a bit more, talking about project possibilities, about the community's needs, about how technology could be an ally in social transformation. As the sun set and the park lights came on, the conversation flowed more and more naturally. "And what about the ball?" Michael finally asked as they were approaching the main gate of the park. "What about it? Do you still want to go with me? Not for the bet, not for the money for charity, but just to go?" Caroline adjusted her glasses, a gesture that Michael was beginning to find peculiarly charming. Yes, Michael, I want to go, but with one condition, which is that you go as this person I'm getting to know now, not as the Michael from the business magazines. He smiled, a genuine smile that he rarely displayed in his cover photos. I promise. And Caroline, thank you for giving me this chance. I'm not giving you a chance, she responded gently. I'm just accepting to observe while you give yourself a chance. They parted with the promise to meet again before the ball to sort out the details. As he walked back to his car, Michael realized that for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about status, appearances, or achievements. He was thinking about possibilities, changes, purpose, and surprisingly, about the serene smile of a woman who never needed to change to find herself. The days following the meeting in Boston Common brought subtle but significant changes to Michael's life. In his office, the first thing he did was gather his development team for a complete review of the resource distribution algorithms. We need social impact metrics, he explained to the surprised programmers. Numbers in spreadsheets don't tell complete stories. In his luxurious penthouse, he began emptying closets, setting aside expensive suits and designer accessories for donation. Not that he intended to completely abandon his lifestyle, but each piece he separated seemed to carry the weight of a persona that no longer served him. Caroline, for her part, continued her routine between the clinics, but something had changed in her perception of Michael. During a break between consultations, Mary found her distracted, looking out the window of the office. "Earth to Caroline," Mary joked, placing a cup of tea on the desk. "Thinking about the reformed prince?" Caroline smiled, accepting her friend's teasing. "Thinking about how people can surprise us when we give them the chance to be better than we believe." "You always saw the best in people," Mary commented, sitting down. "Even back in school, when he and the others teased you." "Maybe because I always knew that behavior came from somewhere," Caroline replied, thoughtful. "No one is born needing to diminish others to feel bigger." That same afternoon, Michael surprised everyone by showing up at the community clinic, wearing jeans and carrying boxes. Inside them was state-of-the-art dental equipment that he had bought with his own money. "I thought you could use these," he said simply, as he left the boxes at reception. "And there's one more thing." He took an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Mary. It was a substantial check, much larger than the value of the original bet. To ensure that no child goes without treatment, regardless of any funding system. Mary looked at the amount and widened her eyes. "Michael, it's the least I can do," he interrupted. "Oh, and you don't need to mention this to Caroline." "That's not why I'm doing it." But Caroline was observing the scene from afar, through the half-open door of her office, a discreet smile on her lips. There was something deeply touching about seeing someone discovering their own humanity. Days turned into weeks, and the ball was approaching. Michael spent more and more time at the community clinic, not just delivering donations, but really getting involved. He learned the children's names, talked with parents in the waiting room, listened to their stories. On a particularly busy afternoon, a girl of about 12, wearing braces, approached him shyly. "Are you Dr. Caroline's boyfriend?" she asked with the typical sincerity of children. Michael felt his face blush slightly. "No, we're just friends." "But you look at her the same way my dad looks at my mom," the girl insisted, before skipping away. That innocent comment echoed in Michael's mind for the rest of the day. In his office later, he found himself rescheduling social commitments without thinking twice, preferring to dedicate time to the new projects he was developing with the clinic. Beatrice tried to make contact a few times, but her messages about exclusive parties and gala events now seemed to belong to a parallel universe, distant and meaningless. Her last message was direct. "You're different, Michael, and I don't know if I like this change." He responded with equal sincerity. "For the first time, Beatrice, I'm not different, I'm being who I really am." At home that night, Michael found an old photo from school days. In it, he appeared laughing with his popular friends, but his eyes were fixed on a point in the background of the image, Caroline sitting alone with a book. There was something in that photo that he had never noticed before. While he and his friends seemed to be posing, fabricating happiness for the camera, her smile, even solitary, was genuine. The ball was scheduled for 2 weeks from now, and preparations were already moving the city. But for Michael, the event had transformed into something very different from what it was when he accepted the bet. It was no longer about proving something to Richard or to his social circle. It was about closing a cycle and perhaps beginning another. He picked up the phone and typed a message to Caroline. "I have an idea to make the ball more meaningful. Can we talk tomorrow?" The response came almost immediately. "Of course, same place, same time?" "This time I'll bring the bread for the ducks," he responded, smiling to himself. And so, as Boston prepared to sleep, two people whom fate had separated and reunited in unexpected ways were planning a meeting that could change not only their lives, but those of many others. The ball was approaching, but the true transformation was already in full course. The Grand Hall of St. Thomas Prep was buzzing with preparations for the charity ball. Volunteers organized tables, decorators hung elaborate arrangements, and a technical team installed lighting that would transform the historic space into a fairy tale setting. Among them, Michael walked thoughtfully, observing each detail with new eyes. "Mr. Collins," called the event coordinator, an elegant lady whom he recognized as his former literature teacher. "What a pleasant surprise to see you here before the event. Usually, our more prominent former students appear only at the time of the party." Michael smiled, noting her hesitation in choosing the word. "Mrs. Henderson, I came to check if we can make some adaptations to the evening's program." As he explained his ideas, Michael observed the face of his former teacher transform from initial surprise to understanding, and finally, to genuine emotion. "You know, Michael," she said at the end, "I always knew there was more to you than that boy who hid behind popularity." On the other side of the city, Caroline was facing her own moment of reflection. In her private clinic, between one patient and another, she found time to open an old box that kept memories from school days. Among yellowed photos and well-preserved notebooks, she found her old diary. "I thought I had thrown this away," she murmured to herself, carefully opening the pages she hadn't seen in years. There was her teenage journey recorded, not with bitterness or resentment as many would expect, but with a precocious wisdom that surprised her. "Dear Diary," she read in a particular entry, "Today Michael and his friends laughed at my new braces. But you know what? One day they will understand that all those masks they wear are much heavier than my braces." Mary entered the room at that moment, carrying some patient files. "What's that? Personal archaeology?" Caroline closed the diary with a smile. "Something like that. I was thinking about how life takes interesting turns." "Speaking of turns," Mary sat down with that look of someone who had news. "Did you know that Michael cancelled all contracts with luxury suppliers he had for his corporate events? He's redirecting everything to social enterprises and small entrepreneurs." "How do you know that?" "I have my sources," Mary winked. "And there's more. He's planning something special for the ball, but no one knows exactly what." Caroline adjusted her glasses, thoughtful. "Do you think he has really changed, Mary? Or is it just another social performance?" "I think you more than anyone know the answer to that question," Mary responded softly. That afternoon, Michael had an important meeting in his office. Richard, his former rival and the author of the bet that started it all, had requested an urgent meeting. "So it's true?" Richard asked as soon as he entered the room without greetings. "You're really dismantling your entire empire of appearances?" Michael continued organizing some documents on his desk, calm. "If you call redirecting investments to causes that really matter dismantling an empire, then yes." "Because of her? Because of Caroline?" "Because of me," Michael replied, finally facing Richard. "Caroline just helped me see what I should have seen a long time ago." Richard sat down, studying his former rival with curiosity. "You know, when I proposed that bet, I thought you would do the usual. Use your charm and money to get what you wanted. But you managed to surprise me. It's not about winning the bet, Richard." "No, it's not," Richard agreed, getting up. "It's about losing all the certainties we've built. And maybe that's not so bad." When Richard left, Michael received a message from Caroline. "I passed by the school today. It's looking beautiful for the ball." "It's going to be even more special," he replied. "Trust me." Caroline smiled at her cell phone. Trust, something that would have been unthinkable between them before, now flowed naturally. On her desk, the old diary remained open on a specific page where a lonely but wise teenager had written, "Maybe one day we will all find our true voice without fear of who we really are." At night in his now simpler penthouse after the donations, Michael worked late on his laptop, finalizing the details of his surprise for the ball. On the screen, numbers and spreadsheets transformed into possibilities for real change. Outside, Boston sparkled under the starry sky, a silent witness to a transformation that went far beyond a simple bet or a gala ball. In her apartment in Beacon Hill, Caroline was also awake, organizing documents from the community clinic. Among them, she found a drawing made by one of her little patients. It showed her and Michael, surrounded by happy smiles. In the corner of the sheet, the child had written with a shaky hand, "Sometimes princes don't need castles. They just need to learn to see with their heart." The week leading up to the ball brought a different kind of excitement to Boston. On the streets near St. Thomas Prep, people commented on the mysterious changes to the format of the traditional event. Rumors circulated about the special participation of local artists and small business owners who had never been included in such prestigious events. In her community clinic, Caroline received a surprise that left her speechless. A group of her young patients had organized to create something special for the ball. Mary led the dentist to the waiting room, where 5 teenagers awaited her with anxious smiles. "Dr. Sanders," began Irene, a 15-year-old girl who had regained her self-esteem after a complex orthodontic treatment, "we wanted to show you something." The girls opened a carefully decorated box, revealing a delicate, handcrafted necklace. Each piece had been made by them in craft workshops that were part of the clinic's social projects. "Each bead represents a smile you've given back," explained another girl, Marianne. "And look, we used colors that match your glasses." Caroline felt her eyes water as she held the gift. "It's perfect," she whispered, hugging each of them. Mary, observing the scene, smiled. "They're not the only ones who prepared surprises. I received 3 more calls today about anonymous donations for the clinic's expansion project." "Michael?" Caroline asked, though she already knew the answer. "He neither confirms nor denies," Mary laughed. "But the interesting thing is that they're not just donations of money. They're partnerships, mentorships, real opportunities for sustainable growth for the project." In Michael's office, the transformation was equally visible. The walls, previously decorated with corporate awards, now displayed colorful drawings made by the small patients of the clinic. His assistant, Sophie, was still adapting to the changes in her boss. "Mr. Collins," she called, entering the room with a folder, "are you sure about these changes to the ball protocol? The traditional press might not react well." Michael looked up from his computer, where he was finalizing another social partnership project. "Sophie, do you remember why you started working here?" The assistant hesitated, surprised by the question. "I wanted to make a difference, actually. But I ended up adapting to the corporate rhythm." "Exactly," he smiled. "Sometimes we need a reminder about who we really are and why we started." That night, Michael had a special commitment. In the small apartment he kept as a personal office, he received an unusual group: artisans, street musicians, local small business owners, people who normally wouldn't have access to the circles he frequented. "The ball will be different this year," he explained to the group. "We want to celebrate Boston's true wealth, its people, its culture, its authenticity." Among those present was Anthony, a violinist who played in the streets of Back Bay. His calloused hands held an old but well-cared-for instrument. "Why us?" he asked directly. "Because it's high time we knocked down some walls," Michael responded simply. "And true music doesn't need golden halls to touch people's souls." At her home, Caroline was trying on the dress she would wear to the ball. It wasn't a creation by a famous designer, but a unique piece made by a neighborhood seamstress, Mrs. Rose, who had treated her grandchildren's teeth for free at the community clinic. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Rose said, adjusting the final details. And you know what else? You're happy. Your eyes are shining differently. Caroline blushed slightly. It's just the excitement of the ball, Mrs. Rose. No, it's not, the lady smiled sagely. It's the glow of someone who is seeing someone learn to truly see. Caroline's phone rang. It was Michael. Are you busy? Trying on my dress for the ball, she answered honestly. Perfect, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Because I need to tell you something. Remember when you said we don't need to abandon everything we've built to make a difference? Yes, sir. Well, I think I've found a way to unite the two worlds, but I'll need your help. As Michael explained his plan, Caroline felt her heart racing. It wasn't just a plan for the ball, it was a vision for the future, a way to create bridges where there had been walls before. Mrs. Rose, who was finalizing the adjustments to the dress, observed Caroline's smile widen during the conversation. Love is like that, she commented softly, more to herself than to her client. First it changes the heart, then it changes the world. Night fell over Boston, wrapping the city in its mantle of lights and shadows. At St. Thomas Prep, the final preparations for the ball were taking shape. On the streets, artists rehearsed special performances. In simple homes in the outskirts, people prepared for an event that for the first time would also be theirs. And at two different points in the city, two people whom fate had separated and reunited in unexpected ways were preparing not just for a ball, but for a silent revolution, one that began in the heart and spread like gentle waves, transforming everything it touched. The morning of the ball day dawned with a special golden light over Boston. In Caroline's apartment, Mary arrived early, carrying a box of sweets from the traditional neighborhood bakery and an anxious expression on her face. "Carol, you need to see this," she exclaimed, turning on the notebook she had brought with her. On the screen, several news items highlighted the surprising changes to the traditional St. Thomas Prep Ball. Michael has completely transformed the event. Did you know he invited all the patients from the community clinic and their families? Caroline smiled, adjusting her glasses as she read the headlines. He didn't do this alone, Mary. A lot of people helped transform the ball into something bigger. But it was he who started everything, Mary insisted, studying her friend with curiosity. And don't tell me that means nothing to you. Before Caroline could respond, her cell phone vibrated with a message. It was a photo of the school hall, sent by Michael. The traditional decoration had been replaced by a harmonious mixture of luxurious and artisanal elements. Local artists were giving the finishing touches to installations that told stories of the city and its people. Approved, Michael's message said. Caroline responded with a photo she had kept from school days, the same hall 10 years earlier during a party where she had sat alone in a corner. Much better now, she wrote. In Michael's office, the agitation was different from usual. Instead of the usual meetings with investors, he coordinated the final details with a diverse team, artisans adjusting their exhibits, street musicians rehearsing performances, small entrepreneurs organizing their spaces. Sophie, his assistant, entered the room with a concerned expression. "Mr. Collins, Beatrice is here. She says she needs to talk to you urgently." Michael took a deep breath. "You can ask her to come in." Beatrice appeared at the door as stunning as ever in her designer dress, but there was something different in her eyes, a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "What are you doing, Michael?" she asked straightforwardly. "First you cancel all our social commitments, then you transform the most traditional ball in Boston into a community fair." "I'm doing what I should have done a long time ago, Beatrice," he responded calmly, "building bridges instead of walls." "Because of her?" "The dentist." "Because of who I want to be," Michael corrected. "Caroline just helped me see that." Beatrice approached, softening her expression. "You know you don't need to do all this to impress someone, right? You already have everything." "That's the point, Beatrice. I had nothing of what really matters." On the other side of the city, Caroline was conducting her last appointment of the day at the community clinic. Her patient was Mrs. Rose, the seamstress who had made her dress for the ball. "Nervous about tonight?" asked the lady, as Caroline adjusted her braces. "A little," admitted Caroline. "It's strange to go back to that place after so long, with everything so different." "Different, like you and Michael," Mrs. Rose commented with a knowing smile. "Sometimes we need to return to a place to realize how far we've come." The afternoon was advancing quickly. At her home, Caroline began to prepare for the ball. The dress made by Mrs. Rose was a work of art in itself, elegant without being ostentatious, unique without being extravagant. The handcrafted necklace made by her young patients completed the look with a special meaning. Mary arrived to help her with the final preparations, bringing with her a small box. "I found this among the donations for the clinic," she said, opening the box to reveal a pair of delicate earrings. "It has a note." Caroline took the small folded paper. "To match your eyes that have always seen beyond appearances. M." At St. Thomas Prep, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. The first guests were beginning to arrive, a unique mixture of businessmen in gala attire and simple families wearing their best clothes, artists carrying their instruments, artisans giving the final touches to their exhibits. Michael was in his improvised office at the school, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. His reflection showed a different man from the one who had accepted a bet months ago. His eyes had a different sparkle, more genuine. His phone rang. It was Richard. "You won," said his former rival without preamble. "Won what?" "The bet of Orwer." "Course, you're taking Caroline to the ball, aren't you?" Michael smiled at his reflection. "No, Richard. I lost the bet the moment she became more than a challenge. And you know what? It was the best defeat of my life." The Boston sky gradually darkened, and the school lights began to shine, inviting. At different points in the city, two people were preparing for a meeting that meant much more than a simple ball. It was the closing of one cycle and the beginning of another, a celebration not just of a personal transformation, but of a greater change, one that began in the heart and spread like gentle waves through the city. The Grand Hall of St. Thomas Prep had never witnessed a night like that one. The century-old walls, which had previously witnessed countless Boston elite events, now housed a different celebration. Garlands of lights mixed with handcrafted works, creating a magical and welcoming atmosphere. In the entrance hall, Michael welcomed the guests with a simplicity that surprised those who knew him only from business magazines. He wore an elegant suit but had abandoned his usual ostentation. His eyes constantly sought the entrance, waiting for one person in particular. Anthony, the Back Bay violinist, began to play a soft melody, accompanied by other street musicians that Michael had invited. The music filled the environment with an authenticity that no hired orchestra could reproduce. "This is different," commented Richard, approaching Michael. "But in a good way." "It's real," Michael responded simply, "as we should have been from the beginning." It was at that moment that Caroline arrived. The buzz in the hall gradually diminished as she crossed the lobby. Her dress, Mrs. Rose's masterpiece, flowed gracefully. The earrings that Michael had sent sparkled softly, but it was her smile that truly illuminated the environment. "You are," Michael began, but the words failed him. "Different," Caroline completed with a playful smile. "No," he replied, finally finding the right words. "You are exactly as you've always been. I was too blind to see." Before they could continue the conversation, they were interrupted by a group of children from the community clinic. They ran up to Caroline, admiring her dress and proudly showing that they were wearing necklaces they had made to match hers. "Dr. Michael," called one of the girls. "Look, I brought my violin like you asked." Michael smiled, crouching down to be at the child's height. "And you're going to play for us later, aren't you, Sophie?" Caroline observed the scene with a warm heart. This was a Michael that few knew, but that she had always known existed, hidden beneath layers of social expectations and corporate masks. The hall was full of harmonious contrasts. Executives in tuxedos animatedly conversed with local artisans. Teenagers from the outskirts taught dance steps to high society ladies. Doctors and patients laughed together like old friends. Mrs. Henderson, the former literature teacher, approached the couple with tears in her eyes. "You know something? In 30 years of teaching, I've never seen this hall so alive." "It's because it has never been so full of truth," responded Caroline, gently squeezing Michael's hand. The music changed, and Anthony began to play a soft waltz. Michael extended his hand to Caroline. "May I have this dance?" "Are you sure?" she joked. "Your reputation might be ruined if you're seen dancing with the former school nerd." "My reputation has never been better," he replied with a sincere smile. As they danced, the world seemed to disappear around them. They were no longer the successful businessman and the dentist from social projects. They were just Michael and Caroline, two people who had found in each other something they didn't even know they were looking for. "You know," Michael whispered as they twirled around the hall, "that bet was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Because you won?" Caroline asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because I lost," he corrected. "I lost the fear of being who I really am. I lost the need to impress people who don't matter. I lost all the certainties that prevented me from growing." The music continued, and other couples joined the dance. Mary, observing from afar, discreetly wiped away a tear. Beatrice, who had decided to attend the ball even after everything, observed the scene with a thoughtful expression, as if she too was re-evaluating her own choices. The most touching moment of the night, however, was yet to come. The lights in the hall dimmed softly, and a group of children from the community clinic, led by young Sophie with her violin, positioned themselves on the small stage. What would happen next would mark the beginning of a new phase, not just for Michael and Caroline, but for an entire community that had learned to tear down walls and build bridges. Silence took over the hall when little Sophie raised her violin. Beside her, other children from the community clinic held musical instruments, some with braces on their teeth gleaming under the soft lights. It was the result of a secret project that Michael had developed over the last few months. Music classes for the young patients. "Good evening," Sophie began, her voice trembling slightly. "This song is for Dr. Sanders, who taught us that every smile is beautiful, and for Dr. Michael, who showed us it's never too late to learn something new." The first notes filled the air, hesitant at first, but soon gaining confidence. It was an original composition, created by the students themselves with the help of Anthony, the Back Bay violinist. The melody told a story of transformation, of broken barriers, of recovered smiles. Caroline felt tears forming in her eyes as she watched her little patients performing with such pride. Michael at her side gently squeezed her hand. At that moment, all social masks had completely fallen away. "Did you know about this?" she whispered to him. "About the performance, yes," Michael replied with a smile. "But I didn't know they had composed the music. That was a surprise for me too." In the middle of the performance, something unexpected happened. Anthony, who was watching from the side of the stage, was invited by the children to join them. His professional violin blended with the simpler instruments of the young musicians, creating a harmony that spoke of unity and possibilities. Beatrice, who was watching from a corner of the hall, let a discreet tear escape. Beside her, Richard observed everything with a transformed expression. "You know," he commented quietly, "I think we all lost something important while we were busy trying to prove our worth." The music reached its peak, and the children were applauded by all present. Businessmen, artisans, doctors, patients. At that moment, all social divisions had dissolved into something greater and more meaningful. Sophie ran down from the stage and hugged Caroline, her braces shining as brightly as her smile. "We did it, Doctor. We didn't miss a single note." "You went far beyond the notes," Caroline responded, emotional. "You showed everyone the true meaning of music." Michael approached, carrying a small box. "And now," he said, kneeling to be at the children's height, "I have a surprise for you." Inside the box were small handcrafted medals made by the same artisans who had decorated the hall. Each one had been personalized with a child's name and a special message. "Because every artist deserves their first award," he explained, distributing the medals. Mary, who was discreetly filming everything, couldn't contain her smile. "Who would have thought," she murmured to herself, that that arrogant boy would transform into this. Mrs. Henderson, the former teacher, approached Caroline. "You know, dear, I always knew you would be special, but I never imagined that your greatest achievement would be helping someone find their own heart." The night advanced, and the ball had transformed into something much bigger than a social event. It was a celebration of transformation, of broken barriers, of dismantled prejudices. On the walls of the century-old hall, black and white photographs of old classes silently observed as a new story was written. In a quiet moment, Michael led Caroline to the school garden. The same garden where, years ago, she used to sit alone during breaks, finding refuge in her books. "This is where I began to change," he confessed, stopping under an old oak tree. "That day when I came to visit the clinic, I passed through this garden. I saw a girl reading alone exactly as you used to do, and for the first time I understood how foolish I had been to confuse solitude with weakness." Caroline adjusted her glasses, a gesture that Michael now found adorable. Sometimes we need to go back to the beginning to find the right path. From inside the hall, soft music mixed with laughter and conversations. Little Sophie had begun to teach some dance steps to a group of businessmen, breaking all the formality of the event. Anthony was now playing a popular American song, and voices from different backgrounds united in the chorus. "We still have a surprise for tonight," Michael commented, a special gleam in his eyes. "Something that will change many lives." "More than it already has?" Caroline asked with a smile. "Much more," he replied, offering his arm to lead her back to the hall. "Because now I know that the greatest changes begin with the smallest gestures." The Boston sky shone with stars as the ball continued, no longer an elite event, but a celebration of unity and transformation. And that was just the first of many changes to come. When Michael climbed onto the small stage in the hall, the buzz of conversations and laughter naturally diminished. All eyes turned to him, curious about what would be the next surprise of the night. Caroline, who was chatting with a group of her patients, felt her heart speed up slightly. There was something different in his look. "Good evening to everyone," Michael began, his voice clear and firm but without the old arrogance. "First, I want to thank each of you for your presence. This ball is much more than a social or charitable event. It's a celebration of transformation." He paused, his eyes finding Caroline's in the crowd. "A few months ago I accepted a bet, a foolish bet based on pride and vanity. But fate has an interesting sense of humor. Sometimes our worst decisions lead us to the best places." Richard, who was near the stage, lowered his eyes, a knowing smile on his lips. He too had changed over those months. "Tonight," Michael continued, "I want to announce something that goes far beyond donations or charitable events. I'm transforming my technology company. From today, 30% of all our profits will be directed to social projects in health and education." A murmur of surprise ran through the hall. Some businessmen present exchanged incredulous glances. "But that's not all," he continued. "We're creating a technological training program for young people from underprivileged areas in partnership with community clinics. And the first training center will be installed right here at St. Thomas Prep, which has generously ceded an area for this project." Mrs. Henderson, the former teacher, couldn't hold back tears. Her dream of seeing the school more open to the community was finally coming true. "And there's more," Michael smiled, gesturing to Anthony and his musicians. "Each training center will also have a music school, because we believe that technology and art can and should walk together." Little Sophie, still with her medal gleaming on her chest, hugged her violin more tightly, her eyes shining with expectation. "But none of this would be possible," Michael continued, his voice softening, "without someone who taught me the true difference between success and meaning. Caroline." He extended his hand, inviting her to climb onto the stage. Caroline hesitated for a moment, but Mary gently pushed her forward. Under the attentive gazes of all, she climbed the few steps to the stage. "Caroline will be the director of the company's social project," Michael announced. "Not because she is my date at this ball, but because no one understands better than she does the importance of giving people real opportunities." The applause was spontaneous and warm. Mary, filming everything, couldn't hold back tears of joy. Even Beatrice, who was watching from afar, seemed genuinely touched. "And there's one more thing," Michael said, turning to Caroline. "Something I need to say, not as a businessman, not as your date at this ball, but as someone who has learned to see with the heart." The entire hall held its breath. Caroline felt her heart beat even faster. "You taught me that true transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's not about grand gestures or grandiose declarations. It's about small moments of truth, about courage, to be authentic, about learning to see beyond appearances." He took her hands in his, and at that moment the entire hall seemed to disappear around them. "That's why I'm not going to make a big request or a dramatic declaration. I just want you to know that, for the first time in my life, I'm truly seeing you, seeing myself, seeing all the possibilities that exist when we tear down the walls we've built around ourselves." Caroline smiled, her eyes shining behind the glasses she had never again thought of changing. "And what do you see?" she asked softly. "I see a future," he replied simply. "A future I want to build with you, one day at a time, one smile at a time." The music began again softly, Anthony playing a melody that seemed to cradle that perfect moment. In the hall, there were no more divisions between social classes or status. There were just people, all of them witnesses to a transformation that went far beyond a simple love story. It was a story of redemption, of growth, of courage to change, a story that was just beginning. The most anticipated moment of the night had arrived, the masquerade ball. Following the new proposal for the event, the masks were not luxurious pieces bought in famous ateliers, but unique creations made by local artisans in workshops with the children from the community clinic. Mary distributed the masks to the guests, each accompanied by a card that told the story of its creator. This one was made by John, 12 years old, who dreams of being a dentist like Dr. Sanders. She explained to a businessman who received a mask decorated with small smiles. The lighting in the hall changed, creating a magical atmosphere. Anthony and his musicians began to play a mysterious melody, while guests put on their masks. For a few moments, all identities dissolved. There were no more businessmen or artisans, doctors or patients, just people sharing a unique moment. Caroline adjusted her mask, a delicate piece decorated with small blue butterflies created by little Sophie. Through the eye openings, the world seemed different, as if she was seeing everything for the first time. "Excuse me," a familiar voice surprised her. It was Beatrice, wearing a simple but elegant mask. "Can we talk for a moment?" The two women moved to a quieter corner of the hall. Beatrice removed her mask, revealing watery eyes. "You know, Caroline, I always thought I knew Michael better than anyone," she began, "but now I realize I never really... I knew him. You didn't change him. You just helped him find himself." Caroline smiled gently. "Sometimes we need to lose our masks to find who we really are." "I'm trying too," Beatrice confessed. "Tomorrow I'm going to start volunteering at social project. It seems your influence is spreading." In the center of the hall, Michael was dancing with Sophie, who had difficulty following the steps with her butterfly mask. "It's okay to make mistakes," he reassured her. "The important thing is to keep dancing." Mary, observing everything from afar, was talking with Richard. "I never thought a bet could end like this," he commented. "Maybe because it wasn't a bet," Mary responded. "It was an awakening waiting to happen." Mrs. Henderson approached Caroline after her conversation with Beatrice. The former teacher wore a mask that seemed to be made of book pages. "Did you know I kept all your literature papers?" she revealed. "Especially that essay on social transformation. You were already seeing far ahead, even when everyone thought you were just dreaming." The music changed to a soft waltz, and Michael sought Caroline among the masked figures. Even with everyone wearing masks, he would recognize her anywhere, not by her appearance, but by the way her presence illuminated the environment around her. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. Caroline accepted, and soon they were twirling around the hall. Their masks created an interesting play of light and shadow, as if they were dancing between different realities. You know what's funny? She commented as they danced. Everyone here is wearing masks, but they seem more genuine than ever. Because sometimes we need to hide ourselves to find ourselves, Michael responded, spinning her gently. Little Sophie, who was watching the couple dancing, whispered something to Anthony. The violinist smiled and began to play a different song, the same melody that the children had presented earlier, but now in a softer arrangement, perfect for a romantic dance. Gradually, other couples joined the dance. Mrs. Rose, the seamstress, was dancing with an important businessman. Mary accepted an invitation from Richard. Beatrice found a partner in a young artisan. The masks allowed everyone to see beyond appearances, beyond social labels. I think I finally understood, Michael whispered to Caroline as they danced. Understood. What? Why you never changed? Why you kept the glasses, the sincere smile, the simplicity? You never needed masks because you always knew who you were. Caroline smiled behind her butterfly mask. And now you know who you are too. The night advanced, but no one seemed willing to leave. The masquerade ball had transformed into a celebration of authenticity, where paradoxically, by hiding, everyone revealed themselves to be more genuine. In the garden, under Boston's starry sky, some masks began to fall, not by obligation but by choice. And with each mask that fell, a true smile was revealed, proving that the greatest transformation happens when we allow our true selves to shine. While the party continued in the main hall, Michael led Caroline to the old library of the school. The environment, illuminated only by the moonlight entering through the tall windows, maintained that characteristic aroma of old books and preserved memories. I remember you here, he said, running his fingers along one of the shelves. Always, surrounded by books, building your own world. Caroline removed her butterfly mask, placing it delicately on an old wooden table. This place was my refuge. Each book was a possibility to be who I really was, without judgments. Michael also took off his mask, revealing a different look from the one he used to display on magazine covers. You know what shames me the most? Not realizing back then that you weren't hiding in books. You were finding yourself in them. From the hall, the music arrived softly, like a distant soundtrack for that intimate moment. Anthony was now playing a traditional American melody, and the voices of the guests joined in the chorus, traversing the historic corridors of the school. I have something to show you, Michael said, heading to one of the shelves. Carefully, he removed an old book. It was their class yearbook. I can't believe you kept this, Caroline smiled, adjusting her glasses. They sat on one of the worn leather sofas, the book open between them. The yellowed pages told a story that both had lived from very different perspectives. Look at this, Michael pointed to a photo. In it, Caroline appeared sitting alone in the garden, reading. In the background, blurred but recognizable, was he looking in her direction. I never noticed you in that photo, she commented, surprised. Neither did I, until I reviewed this yearbook a few weeks ago. You know what it made me realize? That, even when I pretended not to see you, something in me always knew you were special. In the hall, little Sophie was looking for the couple. Mary found her wandering among the guests. They need a moment, she explained gently to the girl. Sometimes we need silence to hear what the heart wants to say. In the library, Michael and Caroline continued their journey through the past via the pages of the yearbook. Each photo, each annotation, now gained a new meaning. Look at this, Caroline laughed, pointing to a message that someone had written on her page. Versa, keep dreaming. One day everyone will see what you see. And they really did, didn't they? Michael smiled, carefully closing the yearbook. Caroline, I need to tell you something. Something I discovered today before the ball. He took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. Remember that community clinic expansion project you always wanted to carry out? Caroline nodded. It was her dream to create a network of clinics that could serve even more people. Well, it wasn't just me who transformed in these last few months, he continued, opening the envelope. Richard also changed. He gathered a group of businessmen, all former students of St. Thomas. Together we're going to finance not just one, but 3 new clinics. Caroline's eyes filled with tears. Michael, this is... "It's not because of the bet," he gently interrupted her. "It's because we finally understood what you always knew, that true success is being able to make a difference in people's lives." Suddenly, a familiar music began to play in the hall. It was the children's composition, but in a different version. Anthony had arranged the melody for solo piano, creating something deeply touching. "I think that's our call to go back," Caroline smiled, standing up. Michael picked up the masks on the table, but didn't immediately return them. "You know, I think we don't need these anymore." "We really don't," she agreed. Before leaving the library, Michael paused for a moment. "Caroline, thank you." "For what?" "For always being yourself, for showing me that it's possible to be successful without losing your humanity, for teaching me to see beyond appearances." Caroline approached, adjusting his tie with an affectionate gesture. "You always knew how to see, Michael. You just needed the courage to admit what your heart already knew." When they returned to the hall, they were greeted by familiar smiles. Sophie ran up to them, holding her violin. "Can I play one more song? I learned a new one." "Of course you can," Michael replied, exchanging a knowing look with Caroline. And so, under the watchful gaze of the stars that shone through the century-old windows of St. Thomas, a new song began, not just on Sophie's violin, but in the lives of all present. A song of transformation, of authenticity, of courage to be who we really are. The night advanced, but the ball seemed far from ending. On the improvised stage, Sophie played her new song, a sweet and simplified version of a traditional American tune. Her small fingers glided over the violin with growing confidence, while Anthony accompanied her discreetly, letting the girl shine in her moment. Michael and Caroline watched the performance hand in hand, their hearts full of a silent certainty about the future. Around them, the guests had formed a circle, some still wearing their masks, others already revealing genuine smiles. "You know what's most beautiful," Mary commented, approaching the couple. "It's not just Sophie who's different. All the children from the clinic are shining." It was true. The children who once hid, ashamed of their braces or their humble origins, now occupied the center of attention naturally. They danced, sang, shared stories with the guests, completely at ease in an environment that had once seemed forbidden to them. Mrs. Henderson approached the group, her eyes shining with emotion. "In all these years as a teacher, I always dreamed of seeing these walls witnessing something like this, a moment when differences don't separate but enrich." Richard, who was talking with a group of businessmen near the stage, made a discreet signal to Michael. It was time for another surprise. "Excuse me," Michael whispered to Caroline, placing a soft kiss on her hand before moving away. In the center of the hall, Richard took the microphone. "Attention, please. As everyone knows, this ball began with a bet that fortunately transformed into something much greater." The guests turned to him, curious. Sophie stopped playing, hugging her violin as she listened attentively. "Michael and I grew up competing," Richard continued. "Who would be richer, more powerful, more successful? But today, thanks to a dentist who never needed to prove her worth to anyone, we learned a new way to measure success." Michael returned to the hall carrying an elegant folder. Caroline noticed that other people were also bringing similar folders. They were the businessmen with whom Richard had been talking. "Tonight," Richard continued, "marks not only the union of two extraordinary people, it marks the beginning of a new era for our city. As Michael has already announced, we're going to expand the community clinics project. But there's more." He made a gesture and the businessmen approached, including, to everyone's surprise, Beatrice. "Each of us," she took the floor, her voice firm despite the evident emotion, "is going to adopt a different social area. Education, culture, sports, technology, and everything will be integrated, creating a network of real opportunities." Caroline felt her hands tremble slightly. Her dream of expanding the reach of the project was not only coming true, but transforming into something much bigger. "And there's one more thing," Michael said, taking the microphone. "Each project will be led by someone from the community, because no one better than them to understand the real needs of each area." Little Sophie raised her hand, still holding her violin. "Can I teach music to other children?" The innocent, question drew emotional smiles from those present. "Of course you can," Michael replied. "In fact, you've just been named our first junior music teacher." Mary, who never stopped filming, captured the exact moment when the girl's eyes widened with surprise and joy. Anthony, at her side, applauded enthusiastically. Mrs. Rose, the seamstress who had made Caroline's dress, rose from her chair. "I want to participate too. I can teach sewing to girls who want to learn." "And I can offer violin lessons," Anthony added. One by one, those present began to speak up, offering their talents, their skills, their time. The ball had transformed into a great community meeting, where old social barriers dissolved for the sake of a common goal. Caroline watched everything with tears in her eyes, feeling Mary's arm around her shoulders. "You always knew this was possible, didn't you?" her friend asked. "I always knew that people are much more than they appear," Caroline replied. "We just need to give them the chance to show their true essence." Michael returned to her side, his eyes shining with a mixture of love and purpose. "So, Dr. Sanders, do you accept leading all this transformation with me?" She smiled, adjusting her glasses in a gesture that was now even more characteristic. "No, Michael, we'll lead together, side by side, as equals." Sophie, who had approached, without them noticing, hugged them both. "Now you're really seeing with your hearts," she said with the wisdom typical of children. The music began again, now with several instruments joining Anthony's violin. It was a melody that spoke of hope, of union, of possibilities. And as the guests returned to dancing, each in their own unique and special way, a certainty hung in the air. That night was not an ending, but a glorious beginning. The first lights of dawn were beginning to color the Boston sky when the last guests left St. Thomas Prep. The hall, still decorated with artisanal creations and illuminated by soft lights, kept the echoes of a night that had changed many lives. Caroline and Michael remained a little longer, helping to organize some things along with Mary and a small group of volunteers. Sophie had fallen asleep in an armchair, her violin carefully stored in its case beside her, a serene smile on her face. "She had quite a night," commented Anthony, covering the girl with his own jacket. "I've never seen someone so happy to be able to teach music." Beatrice, who surprisingly had stayed to help, carefully collected the artisanal masks. "You know something? I'm going to keep mine, to remind me that sometimes we need to hide to find ourselves." Richard organized the folders with the documents of the new social projects. "It's funny," he reflected, "we spent so much time competing for things that didn't matter, when the true victory was in learning to collaborate." Mary, who had finally put away her camera, hugged Caroline. "I always knew you would change the world, friend. I just didn't imagine it would be like this, transforming hearts one by one." Michael observed the scene with a new perspective. The hall, which previously represented for him only status and tradition, was now impregnated with deeper meanings. Each corner told a story of transformation. Each shadow held a memory of change. "Come here," he called Caroline, leading her to the balcony overlooking the garden. The sun was rising lazily over Boston, painting the old rooftops with shades of pink and gold. The Charles River shimmered in the distance, a silent witness to so many stories of love and transformation. "You know what I've learned most in these last few months?" Michael asked, embracing her from behind as they observed the city awakening. "What?" "That. True value isn't in what we possess, but in what we share. It isn't in the power we exercise over others, but in the ability to empower people." Caroline turned to face him, her eyes shining behind the glasses that were now an inseparable part of her personality. "And I learned that sometimes we need to give people the chance to be better than they themselves believe they can." From the hall came the soft sound of Anthony testing his violin. He had promised one last song before everyone departed. The notes floated in the morning air like promises of a better future. Sophie woke up to the sound, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "Is it over?" she asked, concerned. "No, dear," Caroline replied, returning inside with Michael. "It's just beginning." Mrs. Henderson, who had returned to retrieve something she had forgotten, found the group gathered in the center of the hall. "You know what moves me the most?" she commented. Seeing that shy girl with braces and this boy who hid behind arrogance finally found not just each other but themselves, Anthony began to play. It was the music that the children had presented at the beginning of the night, but now in a different, more mature, deeper arrangement. Sophie, now more awake, picked up her violin and joined him. One by one, those present began to dance. It was no longer a formal ball dance, but something more natural, more genuine. Beatrice danced with Richard, both smiling with the simplicity of the moment. Mary filmed one last time, wanting to capture that instant of pure authenticity. "Michael," Caroline called softly as they danced. "Yes?" "Thank you for losing the bet." He laughed, a sincere laugh that echoed through the hall. "You know what's funny? For the first time in my life, losing made me feel like a real winner." The sun was completely up when they finally left the school. On the sidewalk, Sophie held Anthony's hand, who had offered to take her home. Beatrice and Richard animatedly discussed the details of the new projects. Mary gave final hugs to everyone. "See you on Monday," Sophie asked Caroline. "I have an appointment, and then I'll give my first music lesson." "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Caroline smiled. As they walked down the old street hand in hand, Michael and Caroline carried not just the memories of an extraordinary night, but the certainty of a